Mic test muna ako. Mic test, mic test. Yan. Marami akong nakikitang pangalan na kino-comment ang inyong mga pangalan without your sections. I'm not going to look for your sections, mga kapatid, when I check your attendance, okay? So you have to mention from what section are you. So comment your names again. And if you can hear me clearly, kindly type 1, type 1. Sa comment box natin, type 1. If I am loud and clear, mga kapatid, can you type 1, type 1. Type 1. Am I clear? Ayun, marami ako nakita. Ayan. So, thank you for the feedback. And again, I have to repeat myself. I will wait until 4:10 to check the attendance. Please mention your sections. What section are you? Tatlong section tayo this afternoon. Cream 4A, Cream 4B, and Cream 4E. So kindly mention your sections because I'm not going to look into the other sections if I'm going to check your name. Tignan ko lang yung pangalan, automatic. Makita ko yung section, check ko kagad. Okay, and this is being recorded, of course. So, I would know if you'll be listening until the end of our lecture. So we have like 6 minutes to wait for your classmates. Yung mga makahanap ng signals and everything have 6 minutes to do their thing. Ito man eh.
Get this deep.
Okay, so I guess I have waited long enough for you mga kapatid para sa attendance check and for others to join. There are supposed to be 3 sections for this afternoon's discussion, but I guess I'm not sure where the others are. There are only 57 that I can see on my screen right now that is watching. And my news sa 57 na nandyan, I will check attendance after the discussion. Although I'm not going to ask you to write your names again, I'm going to check on my screen kung sino pa rin yung nandyan hanggang sa end ng ating discussion. Okay? Ayan, so 58 na tayo. I think we're going to give them a little bit more. 30 seconds for them to join. 30 seconds and then we start with our afternoon lecture, the very first official lecture of our subject, CA3. So yan, I guess habang inaantay na natin yung iba, simulan na natin para makarami tayo ngayong hapon. Okay, let me remove that for one. Okay. So yan, once again, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is our first live stream for our prelims for the subject CA3 or Therapeutic Modalities. Ayan. So under this subject, I have already discussed to you during our orientation introductory lesson the class rules for this subject only. Okay, so I will no longer go over this because I think you have understood this quite clearly, and also it was included in the uploaded soft copy of our lesson. So kindly go back to this when you have something to um, ask. Go back to this one again. So ayan, our prelim contents, of course, I have told you this earlier also. So we try to focus on the laws on human rights, although we're not going to go in depth about those laws. And then we have to discuss also the treatment and punishment, different treatments and punishments, and the governmental programs for the victims. And as I have reiterated to you earlier, if time will allow us, we will touch also on the intro of different therapeutic or treatment models or modalities. But if time won't allow us, this will be, this unit 4 will be already for our midterm topic. Ayan. And I can see a lot of students. Ayan. So, good afternoon, everyone. As we are discussing, I'm going to, if you have questions or just like in case I'm talking so fast that you need me to pause a little bit, just hit the comment box. I can read whatever is your comment. Basta walang foul language dito, okay? Ibablock kita pag may mga foul language dito. And I will ask our program head to drop you from my subject. So we don't do Latin words in here, okay? Yeah. So good afternoon sa mga good afternoon dyan. I know that you can hear me clearly. So I have asked also earlier. Then comment kapag blurry, comment kapag masyadong mabilis, okay? So that's for our topic for our prelim. Now, let's go back to your prelim activity 1. Madaming nagulat and madaming nag-send sa akin ng message asking, "Ma'am, talaga nga activity 1 nga dagos madi tayo pa yung nag-discuss." Yes. Because this is analytical. This is an analytical question. Okay? It doesn't mean naman may mga maling sagot. Let's just take a look back, or let's do an assessment of how you guys answered your prelim activity 1. I have watched specifically from your sections 4A, 4B, and 4A because you are all together in this discussion. So I have watched some last night and early this morning your video activity. That is actually your recitation number 1. So all 4th years under this subject, under me, has done this activity. So this is your recitation number 1. Yan. So gagawin ko dapat tong 40, 30 points. Pero parang 20 points na lang yung ginawa ko. Ayan. So let's take into consideration your answers. Okay, and then it started raining again. Anyways, yan. I'll try to make my voice louder if it's not loud enough. Okay, so assessment natin. In your video, you have to introduce yourselves first. That I'd like to commend everyone. Like, my name is Brad Pitt. I'm 24 years old. I'm from the municipality of Bacara, Ilocos Norte, and I'm a 4th-year student at Data Center College of the Philippines. Really, you have to introduce yourselves that long, but good on that. I was expecting like, my name is Angelina Jolie. I'm from Bacara, and this is my video. That kind of introduction is already okay with me. But then your others, or most of you have introduced themselves quite long, but that's okay. Anyway, I won't be able to remember from what municipality you're from anyway. So, ayan. The question was, what is human rights? Ayan. But before you answer the question, what is human rights, I have put in here, give your opinion on the following. When I say your opinion, it's from you. So let's take a look at the sentence below. The answer to this question, or the answers to this question, should come from your own understanding or your own words. And then I have said here, explanation in Iloco, or your local language, or Filipino is accepted. Yeah, so what is human rights? So, I think a lot of you have read, indeed, your notes on human rights. And this is where their answers came from, actually, most of you. For a moment, it's blurry. And so most of you have answered their recitations, like, what is human rights? Human rights is this and that. Ito po ang human rights ay ganito. But your answers came from these notes. So you see, you could have answered better. Definition of human rights is this, as according to the notes, or as according to my research. And this is what I have understood about human rights. Kasi jay kumadingkas tayo nga na-explain, mga kapatid. So you can read, 'di ba? In Filipino or in English, kung ano man yung na-research ninyo, ano yung naintindihan nyo, and then you can explain further. Sabi ko nga, 4th years, huwag kayong matakot to express yourselves. Baka kami irong ni ma'am, ito yung answer ko. No. Okay? So, medyo 50-50 doon. And then another question was, why is it important to you as an individual? Why is it important? Some of you have read the answers from your notes on why human rights is important, and also from the examples of your right as individual. Ang daling sagutin ng number 3, mga kapatid. My right is to live. I have the right to express myself. I have the right to go to school. I have the right to fall in love. 'Di ba? Mga ganun. Yung inyong right or examples of your right as an individual. I didn't ask you, mga kapatid, to, reiterate your rights na nakikita nyo sa notes or sa inyong mga libro. Diba? In answering this recitation, I was expecting more of, self-expression from you. Pero yung iba parang nahihiya pa. Diba? 4th years na kayo, okay, mahihiya pag mga recitation na ganito. Assert your ability to, answer questions like this, for example. training lang 'to kasi 'pag nag-interview kayo later or sooner or later, madali lang sumagot actually, okay? So, anyway, baka magsisingit na naman ako ng ibang idea, but that is the assessment. That is my assessment on your first video recitation. Actually, that is already your recitation. So, ang susunod na activity na natin dito is hindi na siya recitation kagad, okay? And so an introductory video, I'd like you to watch this one. Actually, this next video is quite a promotion, pero this is the simplest kasi na nakita ko, na nahanap ko, na pwedeng maintindihan ng kahit na sino. Okay? I hope you can all watch this one. So let's watch this. Yeah, so it's a very short video for you to just a little bit of background on human rights. Actually, marami namang idea. Human rights is a very broad subject and we need to, chop chop kung ano talaga yung pag-aaralan natin about human rights. And I, for one, I'm not going to go, purge myself into discussing as if I know all the topics about human rights. We're just going to touch the tip of the iceberg in this human rights subject. Medyo, kapag usapin kasi ng human rights, meron yung mga sensitive, meron yung mga ayaw pag-usapan ng human rights, kasi hindi nila masyadong alam kung ano yung human rights, correct? Meron naman yung iba na sensitive, kaya ng sinabi ko, because they have experienced human rights firsthand. Meron din yung ibang ayaw pag-usapan because of a religious belief, maybe, or political belief. So we are going to discuss human rights as according to the book in this time, because this is for the purposes of your learning. So I take it that we have to discuss human rights in accordance or by the book tayo mag-aaral ng human rights. Ayan, sa mga nagko-comment na mga pangalan dyan na walang section, I have to ulit-ulitin ko yan. Baka wala kayong section, hindi ko makikita yung section ninyo, hindi ko hahanapin kung saang section kayo nabibilang. So, okay. This answer to your to the question that I've given to you is actually from the book or from researchers. Para safe tayo sa usapin ng human rights. I have my own personal beliefs sa human rights. I have my own political beliefs sa human rights. But this one, for our discussion, we are going to stick by the book, sabi ko nga. So what is human rights? These are basic rights and freedoms that belong to every person in the world. Every person. Human. Diba? Nakalagay dyan, human rights. Ito ay mga karapatang pantao. Hindi ito karapatang pang-hype or pang-ano pa man. This is for every human being. So pagkapanganak mo pa lang, this is already your right. Birthright mo na ito. So from birth until death, these are your rights. Yan mga examples lang naman natin yung mga nakalagay dito, but this is not limited or human rights is not limited dito. Yan. So saan nakabase yung ating mga rights? Yan. Like dignity, fairness, equality, gasgas na issue na yan, equality, respect, independence, and a lot more. Yan. So yung human rights na to, innate or birthright, yun. Dinefine lang ito ng ating batas or ng ibang batas ng iba't ibang bansa. Pero actually, kahit wala pa man yung batas na yan, nasa sa atin na yung human rights na yan. Pagkapanganak pa lang natin. Parang dinefine lang siya. Kasi lang, inika na lang kung shape. Yung law, binigyan niya lang ng shape. Dinefine niya lang kung ano yung human rights. Naglagay lang siya ng parameters, ganyan. And protect na yung human rights. Para kung may mag-violate man ng human rights na to, merong karampatang parusa or yung punishment na tinatawag. And then, from that punishment, magkakaroon ngayon ng treatment kung saan uusbong yung ating subject na treatment modalities, ganyan. Or therapeutic modalities. But anyway, as I have reiterate, I will just have to, reiterate the main focus on this one. Baka sabihin nyo naman, paulit-ulit ito nga, Mistra. Yan. So yung ating human rights, birthright, until death yan, di yan matatanggal. And also defined and protected by our laws. Ganyan. O, yan yung human rights, ha? Naintindihan nyo na? Ito yung basic rights and freedoms ng lahat ng tao sa mundo. Pagkapanganak pa lang yan hanggang kamatayan. So yan ang human rights as defined. And then, bakit daw important ang human rights? Diba? Bakit important na mayroon akong rights as a person? Bakit kayo na estudyante may mga rights kayo? Why is it important? According to the definition again of our research, it allows people to speak up when they experience abuse and corruption perhaps. Yan. Dalawa lang yung nilagay ko pero marami to kaya dot yun. So let's say for example, a person experiences abuse. Yan. So, yung abuse, hindi lang siya limited sa mga sexual abuse, ganun. So, pwede rin yung verbal abuse. That is also a form of abuse. Kaya kung kayo, bina-verbal abuse kayo ng mga boyfriends, girlfriends ninyo, that is a form of abuse. Kapag minumura ka, that is a form of verbal abuse. Okay? So, that's an example. That is against human rights. So, bakit kailangan malaman mo yung human rights mo? Para alam mo kung kailan ka dapat mag-speak up or mag-seek ng help sa mga professionals or sa family mo for that matter. Para alam mo kung, dapat alam mo yung human rights mo, para alam mo kung kailan ka dapat magsalita. Diba? Okay. Let's say for example, para mas constructive yung ating example. Like for example, you as a student, feeling mo ina-abuse kita kasi hindi kita binibigyan ng chance to submit your activity. Pero let's take also into consideration, bakit ay totoo ba kayang naapakan yung human rights mo sa student? There are laws regarding that also. At sa example nga natin, di ba, bakit hindi ka nakapag-submit or bakit hindi kita inaalaw na mag-submit ng yung activity? Because you're late or because you did not attend our lecture and that is our rule, correct? So, totoo nga bang naapakan or na-violate yung human right mo on that one? Ganon. And also one example is that for us people to speak up when there is corruption. So, alam ko naman siguro updated kayo sa mga nangyayari sa ating government where there's corruption everywhere. Department of Health, tsaka yung bagong labas ngayon ng Commission on Audit na yung corruption sa government wherein they spent billions on this project na wala naman, mga ganon. So, human rights natin, mga taxpayers to know those things because it is our right na yung tax na binabayaran natin ay hindi para doon. So that is one example ng human right also. And it is said here that the concept of human rights, it empowers people. Yan. And then it tells them that they deserve dignity from society, of course, respect, nandiyan na rin. And whether the government or other people are standing for them or not, or whether they can stand up for themselves. Ganun. So I hope medyo klaro ba yun? Klaro ba? Naintindihan nyo yung mga kapatid yung why do we have to learn about human rights or why is human rights important at all? Ito yung sabi sa book ha, tsaka sa isang research, ito yung sagot on why is human rights important. Yan. So, I really don't want to interject a lot of ideas into your minds because you're already fourth years. But personally, this is my answer to this. Why is human rights important? Simple lang. For me and for others to know our own rights and to give respect to those rights, diba? Medyo I also have political belief on human rights, but I'm not going to explain it to you further ba kasi sabihin nila, ito nag-i-interject to ng mga ganitong kaisipan, gano'n. But anyways, why is it important for me to know that I have a human right? Yan. Para alam ko yung mga gagawin ko, tsaka mga hindi ko dapat gawin. Mga ganun. Ganun lang, simple. And then, that's a question natin about examples of human rights. Sabi ko nga kanina, I have a lot of rights. Birth rights. Like, for example, number 1, the right to life. Ayan, so, the right to life is given to everyone. Ayan. Everyone, everyone has the right to life. So, pag sinasabing human, medyo malaking debate ito. Yung mga baby na pinagbubuntis is kasama na ba yan sa human rights or hindi? Nasa batas yan ha. I hope you have learned that. But we will not dig into that further. So everybody has the right to life. Yung sinasabi natin dito is yung mga human beings na ha, yung mga naipanganak na. Okay? I'll speak for those that already are in this world. Yung hindi wag mo nating isama yung nasa tiyan ng mga buntis. Okay? So, you know. And then we have the right to liberty and freedom. Although yung liberty and freedom natin ito is also limited or it has its limits. Hindi ibig sabihin kapag you have the right to liberty and freedom, pwede ka nang mag-drugs, mga ganon, di ba? Liberty kasi yun and freedom kasi yun. Yung ibig sabihin dito like freedom of speech. Pero hindi pwedeng yung speech mo is bastos na speech, correct? Mga ganon. And then, another example, the right to pursuit of happiness. Ayan, sabi ko nga, karapatan natin magkaroon ng boyfriend, girlfriend, ng husband or wife, if that is for our happiness. But then again, yung pursuit of happiness, meron din siyang limitation. Hindi po pwedeng sabi sa human rights, I have the right to the pursuit of happiness, their girlfriend naktilima. Kazay, mang ganun. Kasi meron siyang limitation pa rin naman. Anyhow, our next one is the right to live your life free of discrimination. Ito medyo sa ating bansa, okay, we will let us speak about our country. Meron pa rin ito, medyo rampant pa rin yung ating discrimination. Meron ba sa inyo ang hindi nakaranas ng discrimination from grade school hanggang ngayon? Ayan, so meron ba? Kung meron, taas ng kamay, gano'n. Comment box ka agad kung merong hindi naka-experience sa inyo ng what do you call this? Discrimination, yung meron yung term kayo sa Ilocano natuwa ako sa mga estudyante ko nung high school dati yung nakapugpugot. Tawa ko ng tawa nung first na marinig ko yun. Ibig sabihin pala is maitim. Namudeta nga taekwondo nga nakapugpugot. Sabi kasi mga estudyante namin sa wushu. Tapos nagulat ako na ibig sabihin ng nakapugpugot. Only to learn that nakapugpugot ko nakangisi-ngisi gayam. So yun, that is one form of discrimination. Times 2 pa yun because that is also abuse. Okay? Ayan. So, we have the right to live free from discrimination. Sa panahon natin ngayon, ayan, yung mga mas mature na usapin. Mas mature na usapin. Sa usapin ng ating health, nadi-discriminate daw yung ating mga health workers because they work in an environment of virus at baka, they will be the carriers themselves. Meron kaming border dito, yung border ni grandma sa aming apartment. Nurse siya ng triage ng Baguio City and one time na-COVID siya and I have to be honest on this, medyo nagkaroon ako ng pakiramdam na I want to discriminate him because iniuwi niya yung virus dito sa aming building, dito sa aming apartment. But then again, he has the right naman to come home because this is where he lives, dito yung kaskasera, at anangay garod. Medyo nagkaroon lang ng ibang issues, ganon. But anyhow, ganon, you have the right para hindi kayo ma-discriminate. Meron kasi yung ibang, constructive na naman ito na example. Ibang estudyante na di-discriminate daw from other teachers. Na, mo dito, ni ma'am nga kastoy ko, madi nga itad ti special quiz. katkastoy. Actually, that is also a form of discrimination. Ngayon, baka sabihin nyo, apay nga si kagarod, ma'am, di ka magited iti, extension or leeway. Kasi in-explain ko na sa inyo earlier pa, 'di ba, yung ating rules. Ngayon, kapag feeling nyo na di-discriminate kayo kasi hindi ko kayo binibigyan ng chance to submit, let's go back to the rules. Ngayon, kung sinunod ko yung rules, hindi yung discrimination. Kung hindi ko naman sinunod yung rules at pinipili ko lang yung binibigyan ko ng rules, yon ay kind of discrimination. Halimbawa, meron akong section na pinagbigyan to submit their late outputs. Tapos yung section ninyo hindi ko binigyan ng chance, that is a form of discrimination. And you have the right to speak up against that kind of discrimination. Ganun. Next example of human rights. The right to control what happens to your own body and to make medical decisions for yourself. Ayan. So medyo magandang usapin pa rin yung virus dito ha. Pinipilit kasi ng government, or hindi naman pinipilit but actually parang pinipilit, quote unquote, this is my personal opinion ha, quote unquote, pinipilit ng government that every adult from this specific age must be vaccinated against the virus. And to tell you frankly, I am not really 100% okay with that. And I am not really vaccinated yet. That's one of the main reasons why I cannot travel to Ilocos Norte as of yet. Sobrang dami, rampant yung virus natin dyan ngayon. Okay, di ba? And hindi ako makapag-travel dyan because I'm not vaccinated and I'm not allowed by the government to, travel from place to place without the vaccine. Pero I have afterthoughts about the vaccine. And that is my right. That is my right to make my medical decision na mag-desist muna ako sa vaccine for now. That is one example of my right to make medical decisions. Ayan. Yung first, you have the right to control what happens to your own body. Nakikinig pa kayo sa mga showbiz, chismis, ganyan. So, heart evangelista issue, ganyan. Nakita ko kasi sa news kaninang 12 o'clock. Marami daw nagdi-discriminate sa kanya. Again, yung word, discriminate. Nagdi-discriminate sa kanya na bakit hindi daw siya nagbubuntis or bakit hindi pa siya nagkakaroon ng baby, ganyan. Every person, tama naman yung sagot niya, every person has the right to control whatever happens to their own body. Basta hindi naman yun ikasasama ng tao. Ito yun ha, ito yung limitations. Basta wag yun namang ikasama. Kung nani teacher ka, the human rights ka, ada ka karapatan mi nga mga rami, dito iti, bagbagimi, tabagbagimi met dito. Kat si kanya, ti naramin mo tabagbagim, kat minutilate mo tabagbagim. Hindi gano'n ang ibig sabihin nun, ha? Or, ano yung tawag doon? Yung sinugatam tabagbagim, dinangram tabagbagim. That is not the kind of human rights that we are discussing, okay? Although it says here, you have the right to control whatever happens into your own body na hindi ikasasama mo at hindi ikasasama ng kapwa mo. Limitation yan ha mga kapatid, let's make it clear. Kasi yung iba, kinukuha yung context ng sinasabi, mga ganon. Tapos ginagawa nilang reason yon. So, okay. Yan lang yung ating discussion sa inyong first, what do you call this? Recitation. Yan. So, what is it? What is human rights? Why is it important? And the examples. Simple lang yung ating topic dyan. And then let's go to the human rights around the world. It varies kasi, mga kapatid. Although human rights in the general concept is universal, maraming pagkakaiba-iba around the world. Yung sinasabi natin dito na, all the people, if you are a human being, you have the right to be treated with dignity and equality. That is universal. Yung basic rights mo also. Sabi ko kanina, freedom of speech. Pero yung sa freedom of speech, mga kapatid, hindi ibig sabihin na, yun nga, pwede ka magsalita ng bad words against one person at your own will, at your own time, hindi po pwede yung mga ganon. Yung freedom of speech is explained as you have the right to explain yourself, to talk about this and that, as long as you don't hurt yourself and other people. Yung right to privacy, ayan, to tell you honestly, mas gusto ko yung ganon. Medyo private akong tao, hindi ako masyadong nagpapapunta ng visit sa bahay ko, mga ganon. That's privacy. Yan, yung health, that is universal as well. Life, number one dapat yung life pala eh. Life. And liberty and security, yung dapat secured ka. You have the right to feel secured. You have the right to do things or do measures so that you will feel secured. Ayan. And also, yung adequate standard of living. Nung ini-input ko ito, mga kapatid, yung adequate standard of living, it came as a question mark dapat. Pero for the sake of the discussion, sabi ko nga, lagyan natin kasi yun yung naka-define sa mga pinagkukunan natin yung mga modules natin. Kasi yung adequate standard of living, ibig sabihin, the person or the family or the person for that matter eats at least 3 times a day. Standard of living yan. And then, meron siyang health insurance. Standard living yan. Tapos meron siyang liberty to talk to anyone. Standard form of living yan. Pero minsan kasi hindi yan napopractice, correct? Sa ating bansa na nga lang makikita natin yan. Hindi yan napopractice adequate standard of living. So this is a question mark really. But again, di-discuss natin yan na that is one form of human rights around the world. Yan. So, when we say human rights, ang malaking organization that tackles most of the cases of human rights is the United Nations. So, hindi pwedeng mawala ang UN kapag nagdi-discuss tayo ng human rights, or anyone who discusses human rights will have to include yung ating United Nations. So, what is HR in the United Nations? As defined by UN, it is universal, indivisible, or hindi siya po pwedeng mawala. Interdependent, ibig sabihin, it depends on each other. Like for example, yung right natin to health, hindi siya pwedeng hindi connected sa human rights sa life. Dapat interdependent yung dalawa, health and life and liberty. Hindi po pwedeng liberty lang yung right mo pero wala kang right sa health. Ganon. Yun ang ibig sabihin ng interdependent. Magkakasama yung mga yan or magkakahawak kamay yung ating rights. Sabi yan ng United Nations. And nung parang nagmi-meeting kasi yung ating United Nations every year and meron silang binigay na day. Ayan, to remember that United Nations has made a declaration regarding our human rights and it is done every 10th of December every year. Ganyan. This started in 1948. So it's December 10, 1948 nagsimula to. Baka tanungin ko later on sa exam ha. December 10, 1948 sinimulan yung UNDHR or the United Nations Declarations on Human Rights. On yan ha kapag sa UNDHR. Off kasi yung ginagamit ko kapag nagdi-discuss. But anyway, so every 10th of December each year, this is annual, we celebrate, or hindi naman celebrate, we just commemorate that the United Nations has declared or has made a law regarding the human rights of every individual in every nation na member ng United Nations. Kasi may mga countries na hindi member ang United Nations. Let's take for example, North Korea. I am 100% sure. Hindi ko alam, hindi ko binasa ha, pero I think 100% sure ako na hindi siya member ng United Nations. So, hindi siya kasama dito sa, hindi siya sakop ng UNDHR na ito. Ayan. So, millions of people around the world kasi has issues about human rights. Kaya naglabas yung ating United Nations ng, laws regarding these human rights. Ayan, so this is another one, yung human rights in the European Union. Sabi ko nga magkakaiba-iba yung ating pag-i-implement or magkakaiba-iba yung ating policy. But human rights in general context, universal. Once again, I will repeat that. Ayan, so dito sa ating European Union, if you know, the countries of the EU, Russia, and the other countries in Europe, Czech, Slovakia, Italy, Spain, and the others, Portugal, France, Hungary, mga ganun. Meron silang European Union and they have this own set of, what do you call this? Set of laws na parang sa UN din. Meron silang set of, what do you call this? Hindi siya laws eh. Parang rules and regulations. It's much more on that kaysa sa law. Meron silang mga rules and regulations na ginagamit as an instrument for them to be able to support, for them to be able to tackle, or for them to be able to look after the human rights of the individuals, of the organizations, or peopling of their country sa European Union, gano'n. So, parang specific lang para sa kanila. Let's take for example yung, I'm not saying na ginawa nila ito, pero ganito kasi yung tingin ko sa ginagawa ng ibang country ng Europe ngayon. Binaban nila yung mga travels from certain countries. Like for example, ano na yung country sa isa? Hungary. My little sister kasi right now is in Hungary. Yung little sister ko nasa Hungary, hindi kami pwedeng mag-travel sa Hungary because Hungary banned travel from the Philippines because of the virus. Gano'n. So karapatan yan ng Hungary to issue that kind of travel ban. Although right natin na mag-travel sana, di ba? Kasi kasama yan sa ating human rights eh. Pero right din nila kasi nasa bylaws nila na protektahan yung mga people there in that place. That is their health right, human right to protect their people. And they can do that by banning other people to come into their country. So yan, nakapaloob yan sa human rights ng European Union, dun sa mga member countries ng European Union, ganyan. And then, human rights at other forums. Yung other forums na sinasabi ko is other groups. United Nations is a large group ha mga kapatid, and this is another group, European Union, smaller yan. So it also tackles, or it only tackles yung mga European countries. Ayan, so let's take at other special forums. Council of Europe, iba pa to, kesa sa dun sa, sa European Union. And also yung OSCE na sinasabi natin na ito is yung Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Ito hindi lang human rights ang tinatakal ng OSCE na to. Marami din. Meron din tinatakal dito yung mga crime organizations, transnational crimes, pero may focus din yung organization na to about human rights. Nag-a-address din sila ng human rights. Meron din silang sariling rules. Ganon. And also yung ating other organizations such as the Council of Europe. Sa Council of Europe na to it's specified lang. Hindi lahat na member ng European Union is kasali dito sa Council of Europe. Kasi nakakapaloob dito yung mga human rights nila kasama yung kanilang belief. Okay? So hindi lahat ng people dito, halimbawa sa Council of Europe, yung member natin, let's say for example, Spain, France, Italy. O yan, tatlong giant din yan ng Europe ha. Halimbawa, kasama sila doon sa Council of Europe. Meron nakapaloob doon sa kanilang rules and regulations about human rights na nagdagdag sila ng belief or in accordance to their religion. Kasi magkakaiba-iba sila ng mga paniniwala. So yan, nagbe-base sila doon sa kanilang mga guidelines, gano'n. And also these different organizations, they control or they have their own set of guidelines on how or on the relationship between other countries or between other states. Ganun. Basing on human rights. So hindi magkakaiba-iba hindi magkakapare-parehas yung paniniwala ng lahat ng bansa in Europe for that matter when it comes to the usapin of human rights. Meron yung they strongly support yung ating, like for example, yung right sa gender equality, 'di ba? Russia, hindi sila masyadong nagsusupport sa gender equality or yung LGBTQ community. Do you know that? I'm not sure if there are members of LGBTQ sa atin sa klase natin, and that's okay with me. I support biodiversity so much. I have friends in every aspect of that matter sa LGBTQ. Pero sa Russia kasi, President Putin, no matter how handsome he is, hindi siya masyadong supportive kapag sa usapin ng mga ganyan. Although human right yan, actually, yung ating, right to practice the gender that we would want to practice, hindi yan sinusupport masyado ng Putin administration. So yan, isa yan sa mga kanilang guidelines. Kaya iba-iba yung usapin ng human rights sa buong mundo. Okay, ito na yung topic na naman. Human rights in the Philippines. Tatanungin ko sana kayo about this one also, pero iba kasi yung pinagawa ko. But anyhow, kapag tinanong mo kasi yung, let's take it. Wag yung sabihin, aguy-uyaw na or ano ha. Ito mga kapatid, example lang. Let's take for example yung nanay ko. Tatanungin ko, anak mo ako na mamaiti human rights. Magdidiscuss yung nanay ko eh. Pag makakausap yung nanay ko, magdidiscuss yan. Human rights, data adagay karapatan nga by violate the government. automatic yun yung sagot niya. Ganyan. So, anya the human rights dito yung Philippines, pag tinanong ko siya, automatic na yan yung isasagot niya. Hindi kita i-violate the government, dito yung Pilipinas. Yan, automatic yan. Ganun kasi yung concept ng human rights sa Philippines. So, kapag tinanong mo ulit yung mga no offense meant, ha? Kasi taga Ilocos North kayo. Yung mga matatanda na nabuhay nung panahon ni Marcos during the martial law. How do you define human rights? No damagam dagitakot. Ti human rights hangag peso data di panahon ni. So yon. So iba-iba yung concept ng Philippines about human rights. So, when we say human rights in the Philippines, I don't want to purge myself once again na ito yung human rights sa Philippines kasi hindi lang yan. But by the book, we have to study this by the book, okay? Human rights in the Philippines is protected by our constitution. That is mandatory and that is constitutional. So any violations about that is violating the Constitution of the Philippines. Ayan. So to make sure that every person in the Philippines is, to be able to live peacefully with dignity. Naiintindihan niyo naman siguro yung dignity, mga kapatid, di ba? Yung hindi ka nakakahiyang tao. That is dignity. And before I discuss dignity further, yun yung dignity, ha? And then yung isa, live peacefully. Ibig sabihin ng live peacefully, makaturog ka mga na siya at tirabiin. Kasjay. Nga awang pagbutbut ngam, nga inaramid mo nga madi, kasjay. Or awang pagbutbut ngam nga, siga ka, mabalin na kalapidutin, dagiti pupulis, kumbaga. Parang ganon. And then we have to be specific also. Na yung human rights in the Philippines is that we are safe from the abuse of any individual for that matter. Parang kayo, sabi ko nga, you are protected by the Constitution from the abuse of any instructor or any teacher. Kahit pa kay din. Diba? Yung abusive yung pananalita ng teacher. Siguro mang walang ganun. Meron ba? Hindi ako naniwalang meron. Ay, ganun. Or physical abuse, ganun. For that matter, yung mga abuse from any individual. Halimbawa, ikaw na girlfriend, binubugbog ka ng boyfriend mo, sana wala ha sa inyo 4th years yung mga ganun, nang bubugbog ng boyfriend or girlfriend. Meron din mga boyfriend na nabubugbog, kala nyo ha. So that is your right to be, safeguarded from the abuse, mga ganun. Or the abuse of the institution. Like for example, blacklist ka ng data center. Ganon. You have the right to be protected from that. Aside of course, kung yung kasalanan mo ay sobrang grave, naka-blacklist nga naman, di ba? Ayan. So we go back again to the laws. Kapag i-challenge mo kasi yung law na yon na, I have the right. I-challenge mo kasi yung law doon kapag sinabi mong, I have the right according to the Constitution. Titignan ngayon yung Constitution na violate ba talaga yung right mo. Ganon. Ayan. And also you have, or all of us have the right to be safeguarded from the abuses of our country. Civil abuse, ano yung mga civil abuses, yung mga political abuses natin. Pinipilit kang iboto mo si Matthew Marcos kahit ayaw mo naman si handsome Matthew, di ba? Handsome naman talaga yung governor nyo, di ba? Pero mas gwapo si Sandro Marcos, I think. Yeah, basta ganun yun. But anyhow, you have all those rights. We have, actually, I am included kasi Filipino pa naman ako. We have all those rights to be, we have all those human rights, I mean, as constituted by our Constitution. Yan. So yung human rights in the Philippines is also universal or international. Parang naging international, universal, Pilipinas, garuti bagbagang ma'am. It is included in the United Nations. We are under also, or we are included dun sa United Nations Declarations on Human Rights. Kasi kasama tayo sa UN. Member naman tayo ng UN. So nga universal and international pa rin yung ating mga human rights. So halimbawa, magta-travel ka sa, magbigay na ako ng example. When we were in Singapore one time, si husband kasi nakachinelas pumunta sa mall. Yung pinasukan namin na mall, yung mga mamahaling mall, Gucci, Chanel, ganon. Tapos, sinita siya ng guard. Tinanong naman siya ng guard na nakachinelas kasi siya, ganon. I mean, that is actually a violation of our human rights. Kasi, we all have the rights to go into that certain place, di ba? Pero yun lang kasi parang rule din naman kasi nila doon na maging formal ka naman. Papasok ka sa mga ganong klase tapos nakachinelas ka. Yes, anyhow, that happened in 2014, diba? 2014. Mga ganon. So that is one example nung ating international or universal human right. Ayan. I'll tell you one example. In China, I was stopped by one of the immigration officers. Kasi bakit ang dami kong, nung travel kasi kami doon, kailangan you have to bring also your lumang passport kapag bago na yung passport na ginagamit mo. Tinanong niya ako, why do you have multiple passports? Parang medyo kinabahan ako doon. I thought wasn't, I will not be allowed to travel. Pero yan, kine-question kasi yung ganito, ganyan. So I have to explain na kasi sa rule namin sa Philippines, ganito, ganyan. So magkaiba yung ating batas. But they have to respect that because that is my right as an individual. I am still protected by the Constitution of the Philippines. So yun, kapag punta kayo sa ibang lugar, sa ibang bansa, international universal pa rin yung ating human rights dito sa Philippines. Okay? And then one more, it's universally justifiable. As I have just given you the example, gina-justify lang natin yung ating mga karapatan as long as we did not violate any of their laws. So the entire human race regardless of our geographical location. So kahit saang parte ka pa ng Pilipinas, yung human right mo, pwede mong i-practice or pwede mong i-claim, ganun. Hindi siya pwedeng basta-bastang i-violate lang. Ayan. So, one example of our human rights in the Philippines is yung ating labor rights. And nakaka-proud to pag Ilocano ka, or sana proud kayo ha, kasi this started from the Marcos regime. Yung labor rights, si then President Ferdinand Marcos, siya yung nag-call para sa kanyang mga committee para magkaroon ng Department of Labor. DOL siya lang dati ha, Department of Labor. Tapos ngayon, Department of Labor and Employment na siya. Nag-expand na siya to include yung employment sa kanilang laws. Yan. So, but anyhow, yung human rights para sa labor laws, labor code is from the then President Marcos. Ganun. Ito ay binuo niya before the martial law. Okay? So, before na nag-start yung martial law or before na na-implement yan, ayan, binuo niya yung the labor rights. Kung saan, halimbawa tayo kapag nagtatrabaho, baka may magtatrabaho sa inyo ha, yung minimum, ganun. I am not sure kung magkano yung minimum ng daily ng Ilocos Norte. Ayan, dito sa labor right na ito nalagay yan, kung ano yung minimum na sahod ng isang tao. Ganun. Para sa aming mga teachers din, meron kaming minimum. So, yan ay nakapaloob sa aming labor rights. Give me 30 seconds, mga kapatid. Inom lang ako ng tubig, ha? So, ayan. Balik tayo sa ating discussion. Ayan. So, rights of indigenous peoples. Sino yung mga indigenous peoples? Halimbawa, like for example, me. I'm a member of the indigenous people. I am an Igorota. Yung Igorot kasi hindi pa yung indigenous people yun na, pero nahati-hati pa yun. So like for example, me, I am from Sagada Mountain Province. Yung aking indigenous tribe is called Aplay. Diba? Aplay yung tawag sa amin. Like for example, kayong mga Iloco, Bago? Bago ba or Bago? Basta ganon. Yung inyong indigenous, what do you call this? Yung indigenous group. So lahat ng mga indigenous people, meron din silang mga sari-sariling human rights. Like for example, we have the rights to own our land that is given to us by our forefathers. Yan, nakapaloob din yan sa UNDRIP. Ano na pala yan? United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, UNDRIP. So, iba pa yung UNDHR, iba naman yung UNDRIP ha. Yung UNDRIP nakaspecify lang sa rights of indigenous people. Pero yung rights na yon ay human rights pa din. Yan. So, yung ating mga indigenous people dito sa ating bansa, marami silang, marami silang karapatan. Lahat tayo na indigenous peoples, mayroon tayong mga set of human rights. Halimbawa, yung human rights natin is yung paggamit ng ating indigenous attire. Ayan. So, yung iba kasing tao, dinidiscriminate yung ating indigenous attire. Hindi pwede yung ganun. Kasi it is our right. Nakapaloob yan sa rights of indigenous people under human rights that we have the right to wear it when we have to wear them. Ganun. Halimbawa, yung barot saya ng Ilocos, di ba? Ganun. So, yun yung ating human rights situation or parang konting background ng human rights naman sa Philippines. Sana hindi ba kayo naboboring ha sa human rights na to? Sa isa sa mga class presidents kasi ninyo, Ma'am, eto'y badajay may sa oras nga human rights di discuss tayo kasoy. One, maorasan deto'y nga discussion human rights. Pero, we will try to take the lighter side or yung hindi naman kayo maboboring na anya mo dati nga human rights. Human rights mamanan. Ganon. So, I will try to interject new ideas, new situations, mga ganon. So, ayan. Huwag kayong magagalit ha, human rights in the Bible. Deta manan, Biblia. Ganon. Oy, huwag kayong mga kapatid. And baka may mga Muslim sa inyo dyan, mga kapatid. Itong kinuha kong human rights, kinuha ko to sa Christian Bible, ha? I respect yung iba-ibang religious beliefs. And to be honest, we have a Quran at home, but I've never read the Quran. We have a Buddhist book, but I have never read those. So, isa pa lang yung nabasa kong libro regarding religious matters is the Christian Bible. Yan. So, the Holy Bible, the Christians term it as the Holy Bible. At dito ko lang naman kinuha yung human rights na to. Kung may mga human rights din na nakapaloob sa inyong mga Quran, sa inyong mga Buddhist books, and other books or other religious books or other religious sources for that matter, we all respect that. As for discussion lang ito ha, yung human rights sa Bible. Human rights, adagay human rights sa Bible, ana. Nung binabasa ko rin ito, nagtataka ako. Kagabi ko lang din binasa yung mga parts na to. Pero alam ko na merong human rights. Tapos yan. So there are 8 principles underlying yung mga human rights, gender equality rights, mga ganon. 8 yung nakita kong outstanding sa Bible. So yung dignity, tinapik yan sa Genesis verse 1, chapter 21, verse 26 to 28. Pagalitan ako ng pastor. But anyway, yan. Yung dignity nakapaloob daw dyan. So hindi lang pala nasa batas ng tao yung dignity or yung human right as a dignity na sikakat madida nga mabaling yung irurumon. Gabuta nakurapay ka o gabuta, ano na yung term kanina, nakapugpugot ka. When no maliit. Pandak ba? Ang term niya sa maliit, gano'n. Nung una ako nagturo ng wushu sa Ilocos Norte, sabi ng mga estudyante, ma'am, kayang bagsuro, nakababasit ka. Ay, that is actually a form of, discrimination. But I have to accept it. Malit naman talaga ako. Huwag lang sasabihin na anyway, but I'm maliit. Anyway, yung dignity you have or we all have the right to live with dignity. Time nga madida ka nga iruruman. Kasi for any matter or for any reason. Ayan. And then yung freedom na diniscuss dito, limited yung freedom na yun na hindi yung kung nagayam di Bible ka, we have the right to be free. Hindi yung free na mag-smoke ka ng marijuana, free na mag-skip ka ng classes, hindi ka rin ang ibig sabihin nun. It's, deeper than that. And then yung equality, this is actually present sa lahat. Itong 8 na to, yung 1 to 8 na to, present dito lahat yung equality. So yung equality is yan. Male and female, halimbawa, equal tayo sa lahat ng klase ng trabaho. Young and old, equal tayo sa ganitong bibigay ng government. For example, sa vaccine, di ba? Although hinati kasi yung mga senior citizens from the younger ones, ganun. But we are all equal. Meron tayong lahat karapatan na magkaroon ng vaccine or to be vaccinated, ganyan. So, number 4, non-discrimination. Yung sinasabi ko nga, we all have the right to speak up against discrimination. Dinidiscriminate ka ng mga kaklase mo kasi ikaw yung walang cellphone sa klase nyo. Although, meron isang estudyante sa inyo. Although, I don't know how to really help out for now. But let's see about that later. But anyhow, tsaka huwag mong i-discriminate yung mga kaklase mo kasi ang bagal ng signal. Parang ako, sinasabihan ko na, kapag mabagal yung signal niyo, hindi ako nag-discriminate. But I have to require you to attend class. Hindi klase ng discrimination yun kasi nasa batas natin yun sa school. You have to attend your classes. Diba? Hindi pag-discriminate sa inyo kapag sinasabi ko na kailangan nyo mag-join. Hindi ko i-check yung paper nyo pag wala kayong attendance. Hindi klase ng discrimination yun, mga kapatid. Nakapaloob yun sa rules. Yan. So kapag sinabing discrimination, dinidiscriminate yung innate right mo. Ayun. Tapos binaviolate lahat ng rules mo as an individual. And then, human rights sa Bible, it also talks about justice. Yung, basahin nyo nga yung Numbers chapter 27, verse 1 to 11 yan. Yung justice, kung paano ba binibigay yung justice in the olden times or nung kapanahunan ni Kristo. Parehas ba yung pagbibigay ng justice sa ngayon? And then participation at all levels. Parang kayo, participation at all levels activities sa school, karapatan nyo yan. Hindi ka pwedeng i-discriminate ni Dean kasi sasabihin niya na, ay, natawa ka, ang kamabalinzay intramurals, mga ganon. Alam niyo yung mga examples natin, medyo childish minsan yung examples ko kasi mas naiintindihan yung mga examples na ganon. Okay? And then, opportunity to work, opportunity to be attending school, yan, opportunity to travel. Sabi ko nga, my goodness, traveling is one of those things na lahat dapat may opportunity, gano'n. And then yung autonomy na sinasabi is yung, this is related to privacy, okay? Hamang nga tayo autonomy ka, agmemesa ka. Although, karapatang magmemesa, gano'n, pero you know, being alone is very much addictive kapag kinuha mo sa perspective na gano'n. Yan. But anyway, ayan, let's take into example yung isang sentence or isang verse. Isang sentence, sabihin natin sentence, para hindi na tayo malito. Isang sentence sa Bible na nagsasummarize ng ating human rights. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. Equal tayong lahat from birth to death. Diba? Pinanganak tayo lahat na walang kasuotan. Mamamatay tayo lahat, pupunta tayo sa alikabok. That is equality na sinabi sa Bible. And then, endowed by their Creator with a certain unalienable rights. Ang rights natin is right to life. Ayan. So, yung mga nagtatanong about the death penalty before, is it against the law? Meron kasi sa law natin, di ba, allowed sa batas natin dati, yung, anong tawag doon? Yung death by injection, mga ganun, death by this and that. Sa ating batas, allowed yun. It is allowed. But in the Bible, it says that we have still the right to life. And we have the right to liberty. Pursuit of happiness na sinabi ko kanina. So yung diniscuss ko kaninang mga human rights din na sinabi earlier, let's take a look. Where is that? Ayan, yung examples of human rights natin, nakapaloob yan sa mga Bible, mga kapatid. I don't really read my Bible every day or, I often read my Bible kapag, I'm either so happy or I'm either troubled, ganun, yung mga extreme yung pakiramdam ko, ganun ako nagbabasa. But anyhow, ayan, yan yung sa ating human rights in the Bible. And then, we will also touch lang natin konti yung timeline of corrections or konting history ng corrections para sa in relation to our subject na therapeutic modalities. Ito yung form of corrections naman nila. So, from human rights, jump tayo dito ha mga kapatid. May connection pa dapat tayong gagawin dito, pero mag-jump muna tayo for this one. Ayan. So, jump tayo sa ating timeline of corrections. Itong pinapakita ko dito, na Gaols, Galleys, and the Hulks. I know that you have taken these ones earlier. Pero ito kasi yung mga incarcerations ng mga tao dati nung earlier form. Yan. Sa 18th century pa itong kanilang style of punishment ngayon. So itong mga napupunta dito, yung mga taong napupunta sa Gaols, Galleys, and Hulks, they are violators. So ibig sabihin, violate nila yung human rights of other people. Yan yung kanyang connection. So kapag nag-violate ka ng human right ng ibang tao dati, yan, Gaols, you could be put there sa Gaols, sa Galleys, or the Hulks. Basahin nyo na lang kung ano yung mga differences ng tatlong ito. Kasi napag-aralan na ninyo ito earlier in your other subjects. I'm very sure of that, mga kapatid. Unless you will tell me otherwise, mga kapatid. Ay, sorry. Blurred pa ba? Bilis ko magsalita, hindi ko nakikita yung mga comment. Pa-comment nga, blurred ba? This one, the timeline of corrections. I hope it's not. Ayan. So, kapag nagbo-blurred, I'll tell you the one. Dito sa inyong upper right ng inyong mga screen, nakikita nyo ba to? Yung tatlong dots dito. Yan. Click nyo lang yan, tapos i-adjust nyo lang yung HD or yung definition ng inyong mga screens para hindi siya mag-blurred. Dito, yung tatlong dot dito. Yan. Hindi ko siya ma-adjust ha, kasi ay, sige. I think yung iba, nagbo-blurry kasi yung signal, I think, ha? Bear with me. Basta nakikinig kayo sa lecture ko, ando naman lahat yung lecture ko. Ganun. Sabihin nyo lang, baka mas masyadong mabilis magsalita. Sometimes when I'm so excited about my lecture, I really talk that fast that I Sometimes I feel like I'm talking only to myself, ganun. Anyhow, ayan, yan yung timeline of correction natin. Yung mga earlier na construction ng mga to dahil nag-violate sila ng human rights. Ayan. So, kasama din dito yung mga ordeals. Yun yung mga ordeals nila. Like, for example, ito yung ilublob da ka ti danom, natumpaw ka kat, hangkan nyo kasi kat nagbasol, ngam no, ano na yung term nyo, kapag lumubog ka, ikaw yung may kasalanan, mga ganun. Ito naman yung isang ordeal, like for example, pinaratangan ka na violate mo yung human rights yung isang tao, hot water deal, ngano in lebleb mo kano ti imam jag burburok nga danom kat hangka nga nasinit or hindi ano bang term? Sometimes I forget my Ilocano terms. Yung hindi nagpaltos yung kamay mo dun sa mainit na tubig, hindi daw ikaw yung gumawa. Pero pag nagpaltos, ikaw yung gumawa. That is a fluke. Sino ba namang hindi magpapaltos sa mainit na tubig, di ba? But anyhow, those were early forms of ordeals when a person or a certain individual or group of people violates human rights, di ba? So, ayan. Eto na yon. Ito na yung sinasabi ng isa sa mga presidents ninyo na human rights manan. Ito kasi yung mahaba. These are the laws and rules. So, these are the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. UN. Actually, sabihin ko na nga UN. Tanggalin ko na yung universal para hindi kayo malito. Pero universal to ha. UN. UNDHR. This is the UN Declaration of Human Rights. The preamble. Dinidiscuss kasi sa preamble na to, ano yung gist or yung, what is the other term for gist? Summary. Ayan, sinasummarize nito yung buong law, yung buong human rights ng United Nations na declaration na to. Ito na yung summarize nito sa preamble. Nakasummary actually dito yung human rights ng individual. So, lahat ng country na member ng, you see, ating human rights, ayan. Wait lang, bakit nag-iiba yung aking screen? Ayan, nawawala yung aking screen, sorry. Kung ano-ano pinipindot ko. Yan, so anyhow, this is the Declaration of Human Rights Preamble. Ladies and gentlemen, you need to read this. Okay? Hindi ko ito babasahin isa-isa. It's going to be boring anyway. Anyhow, pag binabasa ko ito, sinidiscuss ko ito, medyo boring na to. Babasa-basahin ko lang. But you have to read this kasi nakapaloob dito. Ito na yung gist, summary ng buong UNDHR. Para hindi na natin itakal isa-isa yung Article 1, ganyan. Tapos i-discuss natin isa-isa, ganyan. I'm afraid I'm not going to discuss that, because there are certain people na dapat, specific people na dapat mag-discuss ng mga ganon. And it doesn't matter that I have attended a lot of human rights discussions, symposiums. I will not discuss the law on human rights, okay? A lawyer should discuss that, pwede. They have the authority to discuss that. But anyhow, this is the preamble. Alam niyo ba ibig sabihin ng preamble, mga kapatid? Yung yung pre, para siyang, ano tawag na ka-DJ? Parang introductory. Bago mo pag-aralan yung buong declaration ng UN about human rights, ito yung introductory sentences niya. This is the preamble of the UNDHR. And then, we also have our preambles, na human rights preamble dito sa Philippines. We, the people of the Philippines, or peoples of the Philippines pala. Walang we, ganyan. Ito naman, ibig sabihin nito is dun sa ating human rights, human rights laws and regulations ng Philippines, meron din siyang preamble. Ito din yung kanyang summary, kung ano yung nakapaloob doon sa human rights laws natin. Ganyan. And this is para siyang, it's a solemn promise, parang ganun. Pinapromise nito na we have to stand by these laws as people of the Philippines in order to safeguard yung ating human rights. Yan. So, para makapagsalita pa rin tayo ng against the government, ganyan. Yes, sometimes I do speak against the government, ganyan. Kahit dito sa issues namin dito sa Baguio City, sometimes, I speak openly against it, mga ganyan. Karapatan natin yan. And this human rights preamble, nakapaloob dyan na sinisafeguard niya yung human rights natin. So, basahin nyo itong preamble ng Philippines, ha? And then, ang gulo, no? Yung ating timeline of corrections, kukunin lang natin yung timeline. Hindi na natin i-discuss yung ancient corrections. This is in relation to this one. timeline of corrections. Bakit? Wait lang ha. What is wrong with my presentation? This is supposed to be here. No? Iba yung nilagay ko. But anyhow, yan yung activity ninyo mamaya eh. Ayan yung declaration, preambles natin. So yung timeline of corrections, ilipat ko na lang ito mamaya later. Corrections is because this is related to our therapeutic modalities. Dito nag-spring or dito nag-start kung bakit kailangan magkaroon ng therapeutic modalities. Ganun. 13th century, yung mga criminals natin, they escape punishment by securing refuge sa church. Ganyan. So, doon sa church, they can, parang pwede silang tumira doon ng 40 days. Nagsasanctuary sila sa church at protected sila ng laws of the church. That is one of the escapes ng ating mga criminals. At doon sa church na yon na parang nagkakanulo or nagpro-protect sa kanila, meron silang sariling style of therapeutic modalities for these criminals. Yan. And then 1576 or 15th century, para hindi na tayo malito. Century na natin din ito kasi naka-century naman tayo. This is 15th century also. Let's take into this one. Wait lang. Ayan. So 15th century naman, doon sa England, nagkaroon sila ng law na yung House of Corrections should be constructed or should be separate. Ganyan. Para may separate na nila yung mga offenders. Hindi na sila basta-basta na lang parang nahuli tapos hindi rin sila mabibigyan ng justice later on kasi hindi naman naikukulong. Pwede pa silang maka-escape, ganun. Pwede pa silang mag-create ulit ng another crime, ganyan. So during 15th century, ayan, nagkaroon na sila ng mga laws on the creation of, what is this? Bridewells. Maganyan. This is for the confinement or imprisonment of an offender. At dito sa kanilang mga bridewells, dito nangyayari yung style ng kanilang corrections. Kasi therapeutic modality is a form of correction, mga kapatid, ha? So dito nangyayari yung kanilang form of correction ng 15th century. And then 16th century, tinatransport naman yung mga criminals from one prison to another. So pwede silang mag-cross country, gano'n. Buti pa sila cross country, ganyan. But anyhow, yung pagta-travel dito is actually galing ka sa isang, like for example, prison A na nasa, ano ba yung mga country na magkakalapit? France. Yan, France. Halimbawa, sa France, prison A ka galing doon. Tapos, ililipat ka sa prison B sa Portugal, which is worse or mas pangit yung condition ng prison na yun than the first one. Yan yung mga usually ay situation ng corrections noong 16th century. Ganyan. So, like for example, hindi naman sinasabing lahat is mas pangit. But anyhow, mas worse yung situation. So, yan. Cross-country from one country to another usually during the 16th century. And then, sa pagpasok ng 18th century naman, yung mga confinement buildings, prisons, ganyan. Yan na yung na-construct, yung mga buildings ng mga prisons, ganyan. Mahilig ba kayo manood ng mga medieval movies, ganyan, yung mga prisons natin, Waterworld. But anyhow, that's a form in the water naman kasi. Yung Waterworld, yung big boat doon is actually a prison. Ganon. Yun. And then, this is individual, society, and the state. Ang gulo talaga. Wag niyo na munang pansinin ito, pwede. Pinagpalit ko lang. Sandali lang, ha. Ayan. So, itong susunod natin yung what kinds of human rights exist. Pero later on na yan. Okay? Ow. What is that? Ang lakas naman. Ito pala. Kasama pala yan. Ayan. So, para sa ating discussion later on, i-intro ko na lang yung ating next discussion. What are the kinds of human rights that exists? Huwag nyo nang basahin ito, kahit huwag nyo nang basahin ito. Tignan nyo lang yung ating image. Ano yung nakalagay sa ating image? Ano yung mga human rights natin? Ito yung mga examples kanina. Actually, dapat kanina pa diniscuss to nawawala ata tong slide na to. Anyhow, ito yung kinds of human rights that exist or should exist for that matter because it is part of the law. Education. lahat kayo, pati ako, may karapatan tayo lahat sa education. Kapag sinabing education, hindi lang basta-bastang edukasyon to. Education to learn sa mga institutions, halimbawa sa data center. Karapatan mo yan, hindi ka pwedeng basta-basta sabihan ng data na hindi ka pwedeng mag-aral dito. That is your right. Yung education na sinasabi is the quality education, not just from schools. Education from the government. Baka naman may mga symposiums ang government ninyo. Halimbawa, di ba? Right to thoughts, of course. That is your private head. You have all the rights about what runs in your head. And then press. Karapatan nating malaman from press. At karapatan nating malaman yung katotohanan sana from the press. But that is not really what's happening right now. But anyhow, we have the right to know the truth from the press. We have the right about information. This is in relation to press. Ano ba yung totoong nangyayari sa bansa about this virus, di ba? Although totoo na may mga namamatay, totoo bang from the complication of the virus? Hindi kaya from the complication of the vaccine? Mga ganun. I'm not trying, ladies and gentlemen, to interject ideas sa nag-e-example lang ako dito. And then, right to speech, sabi ko nga, just not bad ones. Try nyo lang maglatin sa subject ko, sabi ko nga sa inyo. 70 ang grade mo sa finals. It doesn't matter if you passed all your, outputs. I demand yung hindi pwedeng magsalita ng masama dito. Unless ako yung nauna, pwede kang sumagot. And then we have the rights to religion, as I have said earlier. You have the right kung gusto mong Kristiyano ka, Muslim ka, you have all the rights for this religious preference. Wait lang ha, sa association mismo muna tayo. You have all the rights to join any association that you want, or you want to associate yourself with this group. Example natin, LGBTQ group, pwede mong i-associate yung sarili mo, karapatan mo yan. Yan. Gusto mong i-associate yung sarili mo sa mga anti-Marcos, pwede naman. Mga ganun. So you have all those kind of rights. And itong movement and assembly na tinatawag, halimbawa gusto mong maki-join sa rally, karapatan mo yan. Hindi yan violation sa government, hindi yan violation sa laws. Karapatan mong mag-join sa mga ganun. Yung tinatawag kasi nila na hanga mabaling ag-rally kasi against the government, it's not. Pwede kang mag-rally. Pero pag baka may binaviolate ka lang na certain rules or laws regarding sa pagrarally. Pero yung the motto proprio na mag-rally ka, hindi yun human right. As long as yung may pinagmalalaban yung rally mo, or may pupuntahan, may purpose naman yung gine-join mo na movement or assembly. Yun. So yan yung ating kinds of human rights. Ayan, so I've been talking for more than an hour. Amazing. Anyhow, ayan. So before I give you your activity, ladies and gentlemen, your prelim activity number 2. And again, I want to repeat this one. Kanina 80 plus kayo ha. Ngayon 69 na lang. Yung mga nag-leave sa discussion, nakikita ko yung mga tao dito sa aking screen. So there are 69 of you watching right now. Kanina 80 plus tayo. Ayan, 71 nag-jump. But anyhow, yung mga nandito lang, sila yung pwedeng sumagot ng ating prelim activity number 2, okay? So before we go to our activity, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to give this floor to you. You can ask me questions regarding our lecture. Do you have questions? Mabilis masyado ako magsalita? Or do you have reactions regarding this? 4th years? Ay, ngayon ko lang nababasa yung ibang comments. Internet connection, okay. Depende connection. Ayan, and then, unang salita sa saligang batas. Yes, that's the preamble. The intro sa ating batas. Yes, that's the preamble. So, do you have questions? Key in the comment box lang. Questions kayo. If you have questions, you have recommendations, baka mabilis ako masyado magsalita. Baka naman di naiintindihan yung aking explanation. Ganun. Ayan, may comment. Thank you sa mga, nakaintindi. Pero huwag kayong mahihiyang magtanong, baka kung nayukot, magdagito yung dado mga kaklasik, mauungatan da, siyak madi. Wala, hindi ako nagdi-discriminate ng ganun. Iba-iba tayo ng pagkakaintindi, okay? Baka klaro sa iba, hindi sa inyo. Just ask me questions. Hindi problema yan. Ang problema ko 'pag nag-submit ka ng 10 hours later ng yung output, doon ang problema sa akin. Pero kapag mga questions dito, pwede. Pwede rin kayo maki-debate kung gusto niyo ng debate or hindi naman debate na yung pangit na debate, ha, diskurso lang ba. Kasjay. Ano? Meron ba? Sige lang, mag-aantay ako, 30 seconds pa. Baka mabagal yung internet ng iba. Yes, ading ko. Actually, hindi ko ba in-upload sa ating FB group? I think in-upload ko. Kung hindi sa FB group, sa ating Edmodo, i-check ko ulit mamaya ha, mga kapatid, yung soft copy nito. Kung hindi ko na-upload sa inyong FB group, upload ko ulit mamaya. Yan, yung ating PowerPoint. Tapno, mabalin nyo mabasa in advance, ganun. So, awang damagan yung mga kapatid. Ala, itad ko, DJ ko ayo explain ko muna sandali. Let's go to your, mali ko talaga yun. Dapat di ko muna siningit yung corrections, diba? But anyhow, na-excite masyado. Ayan, ito yung ating problem activities. Kasi 3 sections lang kayong nandito ngayong hapon. 4A, 4B, and 4E. So, ito yung activity nyo. Hindi ito gagawin ng 4C and 4D. Kasi iba yung magiging activity number 2 nila. Ganyan. So, kayong magkakasama, ito yun. But do not copy each other. It doesn't matter if you are from 4A, kukopihin mo yung taga 4B or taga 4E, ha? And vice versa. Hindi po pwede. I read your outputs individually. Okay. So, ayan. Table manner. Table manner yung ginawa ko, mga kapatid. This is table manner. Or if you want to use a diagram, pwede naman, graph, or any kind of presentation that you'd like to do. Yung diagram, Venn diagram. Mahilig yung iba dyan sa Venn diagram. Ano na kasi yung tawag dun sa ibang trees, like the family tree, if you want to use that. Mga ganun pwede yung gamitin yun. Example ko lang itong ginamit natin. Can you point out, ladies and gentlemen, yung differences and similarities of the two preambles? Kaya sabi ko kanina, basahin niyo yung preamble. I'm not going to explain that to you. I'd like to see how you fourth years understand the preamble because you have taken yung already yung subject ninyo about this one. Lakihan ko konti para hindi blurry. Ayan. Maliwanag na ba? Maliwanag ba, mga kapatid? Ayan. Lakihan ko lang konti, sandali lang ha. Wag mo na kayo mag-screenshot, mga kapatid. Actually, you have to screenshot this one pala ha. Wait a moment. Lakihan ko lang konti para makita ninyo masyado. You have to take a screenshot because, yan. Dito ko lang nakalagay. Dito nakalagay sa inyong mga modules. Ayan. Kita na ba, mga kapatid? Sandali lang. I-bold ko lahat. Bold. Charan! And then, lakihan natin konti, 22. Oh, may atan. Madi-blur doon. People in the house. Wait lang, basahin niyo yung tanong. Hambal na yung isang question ng klase ninyo, kapag yung mag-asawa nag-aaway tapos nagmumurahan sila. Okay, SKL lang ha, SKL, share ko lang. Kami kasi, we are 10 years together na this September. Pero hindi pa kami nag-aaway nung ganyan. I have never tried yung nag-aaway. Pero nakita ko yan sa parents ko. Yung nag-aaway sila, tapos meron yung time na nagmumurahan sila, mga ganun. Abuse pa ba yun? Let's take for example, yung husband, minura-mura niya yung wife because nag-away sila at dahil sa galit niya, namura niya, that is actually a form of abuse. Verbal abuse. Yes, to answer your question, kapatid, hindi ko na i-mention yung pangalan ha. Basta yung question is ganun. Abuse daw ba yun? Yes, that is a form of abuse, verbal abuse. At pwedeng mag-insist ng certain right yung tao na verbal abuse. Yan. Huwag mo kasi mura-murahin. Yan. Kaya pag nakita niyo yung parents niyo nagmumurahan, mabaling ka kanong ay darum pang iti human rights ni mamang ta. Kwa. Pero actually, hindi yan masyadong in-entertain, di ba? Ay, away, mag-asawa lang yan. Ganun naman lagi sa Philippines eh. Pero actually, we have the right, all the rights to assert that as our right. Nobody could, make mura against us. Unless we initiated it first, it's just karma. it came back what we have done. So yan, sana nasagot ko yung tanong. May mga questions pa kayo? Hit the comment box lang. Habang ini-screenshot nyo yan yung gagawin nyo ha. Example ko lang ito mga kapatid, hindi ito yung buong gagawin nyo. Baka naman kung ayaw ko, alam, ansaran tayo tali J1, 2, 3 ngayon namin ni Mamon. 5 basic human rights. Ano yung 5 basic human rights? Kung hindi siya 5, at 10 man yan, ilagay nyo yan. Sa UN Preamble, baka naman 10 yung diniscuss, ilagay nyo yung 10. Sa Philippines, halimbawa, 3 lang ilagay nyo. Pero hindi ito yung only ha, dagdagan nyo pa ito, yung ating category nang i-compare niyo. Like for example, categories of human rights. Ano yung mga diniscuss sa UN Preamble na category of human rights? May political bang nakalagay? May individual ba? Sa Philippine Preamble, baka naman naglagay sila dyan ng gender human right, economical human right. Ganyan. Sino yung covered ng human right dito sa UN Preamble? I have discussed this ha. Ano pa yung pwede natin i-compare sa UN Preamble and the Philippine Preamble? This, mga kapatid, is papasok yung inyong, what do you call this? Analytical. Ganon. Yung pagiging analytical natin, kung basahin, ulit-ulitin nyo yung preamble para maintindihan ninyo. Hindi pwedeng basahin nyo ng once or twice, tas aganswer kayo. Masapol maawatan nyo kakabsat. Noon niya din nakapaloob yung preamble. So, ayan. I hope na screenshot nyo na yan, ha. Questions? Wala na kayong questions? Hindi kayo babae, nagdamag kayo lang, mga kapatid. I'll give you the last 1 minute. Uy, akala ko 1 hour lang to. Nakuha ko yung 1.5 hour. Anyhow, activity number 2 na to, ha. Awan damagan nyo, kakabsat. Okay. After natin, ayan, may nagtanong na. Akala ko hindi nyo itatanong, kanina ko pa inaantay. Deadline, mahilig kayo magsabi ng deadline. Kapag deadline, last na yon, ibig sabihin, hindi ko na i-check. Due date, sabihin natin due date, ha. Palitan nyo nga yung deadline na yan, due date na lang. Ayan. So, anyhow, kung sanay kayo sa deadline, anyway, yung due date natin is tomorrow. Magpo-post ako after nitong discussion natin, magpo-post ako sa ating FB group kung saan ninyo isasubmit yung mga answers ninyo. Gusto ko sana sa Edmodo lang, kaso nahihirapan kasi yung iba sa inyo na mag-upload sa Edmodo. I don't know why. Pero sa FB group na lang, baka mas madali. Bukas ito ng umaga, 10 a.m. I'm not sure if you have classes or not. So you have all tonight, to do our activity. So bukas, I'll check my schedule. Anyhow, bukas siya ng alas 10 ng umaga. Adama na nag-message itayan, ma'am, diyak nakasubmit kasi kuha na pang kam hospital. Hanggarod nga rason de, jay kakabsat kasi adamat ti oras nga inted ko kada kayo nga mangi-submit. Kunak manon. Alas 10 tong bigat. Ti due date na dito. Ag-post ak ijay FB group. Okay? Maliwanag ha. Due date bukas, alas 10 ng umaga. 8 bukas. September 8 bukas. 10 a.m. Yung ating due date. Ano pa? Isusulat. Yes, you have to write this one on your yellow paper. Oh, yeah, my bad. I did not include sa ating but you have to write this one. Write this on a yellow paper or any paper. Hindi ako nagpapa-encode muna, ha? Write this one. You have to use pen and papers. Hindi po muna ako magpapa-encode. Sa finals na ako magpapagamit ng encoded activities. For now, yellow paper muna. May mga tanong ba? Yeah. Oo, may nagsabi din. Kano tayo Edmodo? Pero ayan naman yung mga question. Sabi ko lang, magtatanong, mabalin bond paper? Ma'am, oo na nga, any sheet of paper. Basta clean paper. Di ba? Ewan ko ba, sabi ko nga, yellow paper, ma'am, mabalin bond paper. Alam niyo mga second year, mga ganun sila. Ma'am, uy, di ba sinagot ko na? Ma'am, mabalin ti kuan, bond paper. Yes. Agdamag ko. Ma'am, notebook lagaya mo. Ano ba talaga? Mga kapatid. Ayan. Clean paper, any sheet of paper. Due date September 8, 2021, 10 a.m. bukas. No extensions. Pag 10:05 ka, ay, diyan lang mo, 5/30 kan tumanon or 5/50 kan tumanon. Tapos, picture lang tayo, ma'am, upload. Yes, ganun ang gagawin natin, ha? Ay, may klase ba kayo ng 4:30 to 6? Actually, yung binase ko kasi ito, na vacant nyo na 3 section sa hapon. Bakit may klase yung iba sa inyo? Or back subject ba yan? Hindi kapatid, hindi ito yung always. Actually, ngayong second week natin testing actually ito sa ating time. Para i-test natin kung this is viable ba for everyone. Sabi ko kasi kung may mga concerns kayo, halimbawa sa time na yan, bagayo kini-press. Tap ni baga ni press kanya, i-adjust tayo yung time. This is actually for this second week lang. Test lang ito kung ito ay okay ba sa lahat ng sections, ganyan, na nandito ngayon. A, B, and E, ganun. Kung hindi to okay, pwede nating palitan. Ganun. Pero gagamitin pa rin natin yung time ninyo sa akin. For example, yung 4A natin is, yung time ninyo sa akin is Tuesdays, Thursdays, 11 to 12. Gagamitin pa rin natin yun. Mga kapatid, kapag sinabi kong due date, hindi ibig sabihin, antayin nyo pa yung 10 a.m. bukas. Kapag natapos nyo na mamaya, isubmit nyo na mamaya. Kapag natapos mo na after 30 minutes, sabihin mo na. After 30 minutes, diba? Huwag nyo hintayin yung due date. That is the end na nung pagsasubmit ninyo. Ibig sabihin, mag-start ako mag-check kapag due date. Ganun. Ano pa, 4th years? Bahala ka, ading ko. Kung gusto mo ng all capital, parang engineering or architecture student, basta naiintindihan ko yung sulat, walang problema. Nagpapa-all capital lang ako pag yung exam is multiple choice na, A, B, C, D, E ang sagot. Yes. Ayan, ano pa? Yung questions ninyo. Kung mabalin yung aramidin dito after dito discussion, ka-aramidin yun, submit yun. Ano pa, 4th years? Tawanan, damagin nyo. Usually, we will use yung ating YouTube for now kasi yun yung mas accessible natin. Ha? Gusto ko rin yung Edmodo, actually. I don't use Google Classroom, ha, mga kapatid. Baka yung ibang teacher nagpapagawa ng Google Classroom, ako hindi ako nagpapag-Google Classroom. Gusto ko sana yung Zoom. Kaso, minsan nag-off. Bigla yung Zoom nung iba. Ginawa ko yan last year, last sem, pero nag-off yung iba. Mas okay dito, pwede nyo pang balikan. Kapag hindi nyo naintindihan yung lecture or may gusto kayong balikan, dito, pwede nyo balikan. So, ganito muna yung gagamitin natin. Ayan. So, hinide ko na yung ibang video ko kasi yung iba stalker sa inyo. Feeling ko na. Awan damagan yung nga doon, mga kapatid. Habang nagsasalita ako, actually, nag-aantay ako ng questions. Ayan. Awan damagan yun, mga kapatid, dalaga road na awan damagan yun, mga kapatid. Ayan. This ends our lecture for today. And for the rest of the week, halimbawa yung ating 4A. Kayong mga 4A is yung subject natin is TTH, 11 to 12, di ba? So, meron pa tayong Thursday dapat. Pero hindi ko kayo i-meet online na live. Mag-iiwan na lang ako ng link, baka may pre-recorded lesson, or mag-iiwan ako ng isang recorded na sound. Ganon. Sound, recorded na sound. Recorded na voice. Ano bang sinasabi ko? Ayun, recorded na voice lesson, mga ganon. Madi-adding ko kasi hanggang 10 lang. Actually, yung hanggang 10 natin is, yung 10 to 12, gagamitin ko yan to check on your activities. Or, hindi meron pala akong discussion bukas, 10 to 12. So, hanggang 10 lang, para ma-check ko pa rin. Ma-check ko kasi yung time. So, kaya kung i-check yung time ng like 5 minutes, check ko agad, ops, ito, nakapag-submit sila lahat, okay na to. Pero kapag may mga beyond that, ayan, hindi ko siya check. Ganun. Dami ko na nasabi, ayan. So, wala na. This ends our lecture, first lecture. See you on our next live lecture kasi yung ating next will be pre-recorded na. Okay? So, itong YouTube channel ko muna yung gagamitin natin. Subscribe saan? Ay, sarap. My husband is saying na mag-subscribe daw kayo. Hindi ko naman kailangan na mag-subscribe. Basta mag-attend kayo sa lecture ko, okay na kayo. Okay na ako. So, ayan. Good afternoon, everyone. Ayan. This ends our lecture. Please do your activity na. Hindi ako nag-entertain ng mga late activities. Mind you. Yeah, so, thank you also. Thank you. Good afternoon once again. I'll give like 30 seconds para ma-screenshot nyo ulit. Ganun. Let me remove that. Nasaan ba yun? Hmm. Mhm. Okay.